I'm going to try not to cover what we covered yesterday, because from the participants I can see online, the vast majority were also online yesterday. So thanks for coming back. I obviously didn't turn you off too much. Today's agenda is really about SalesMatrix and nothing but SalesMatrix. Going to try and keep the focus there. I will just give a bit of an intro because there are a couple of people on who weren't on yesterday. I want to talk about version 6, which is the version I'll be working through with today. If you do have any questions, there is a chat window. Feel free to add the question at any point, and I will try to answer that question. If not on the way through, I'll answer it in a Q&A session at the end. So any questions that do come up, feel free to use the chat window, and yeah, we'll try and get those answered for you. The other thing also to note is happy to have one-on-one discussions with any of you as a follow-up to the webinars this week. There's been a lot of questions come up. Majority of you online are attaché customers, though there are quite a few other customers there as well, I note. But yeah, the attaché customers in particular have lots of questions, and we're more than happy to help any customer regardless of what ERP accounting system you're using. Just to reinforce, all support, all help is now available direct from the SalesMatrix Proprietary Limited company. This is how you contact us. salesmatrix.com.au or salesswat.com. There is a link on that website which will basically take you through to our help desk. I might just show that if I bring across just to help everyone understand how to contact us. So basically there's a little tag here on the right. There's also basically this menu item here. When you click onto that, that'll take you through to our Atlassian Jira help desk solution. Look, admittedly, there's not many articles here yet. We are working on building out the help center for self-help. There's a lot of old content that we need to update that we're working through at the moment, but there will be more and more content over time. But this is where you can log any questions or any issues that you have. That way we are more likely to follow through, because it's the way that we're sort of dealing with people. Even if you call us or send an email, ultimately we're logging tickets through our help desk system. Just very briefly, it was covered yesterday. For those who missed it yesterday, there are actually 3 products in the stable. SalesMatrix, which is what today's all about, is the product that is our mainstay. It's been developed over a period of 20 years, and it's a very comprehensive solution. We also have our latest product, which is SalesMatrix SWAT. It's a mobile app designed for reps. The way I tend to delineate is sales managers, CFOs, CEOs tend to use a SalesMatrix product as a way of analyzing what's going on in the business. And effectively, reps would use the SWAT app as a way of analyzing what's going on with individual customers to know what to upsell or cross-sell to that customer in order to grow the revenue. SWAT's also got a product SWAT element to it, so warehouse managers, purchasing managers, marketing officers. I'll mention at the end, but if you're interested in knowing more about SWAT, we've got a dedicated session both tomorrow and Thursday. I think Wednesday's pretty much booked out, but we can allow a few people on if you can't make the Thursday session. Thursday otherwise is plenty of tickets available. We also have a new product called Dashboards. This is something that we tended to fight over the years. A lot of people have asked us about traditional type reporting, and we've really said that that's not what we're trying to build with SalesMatrix, but at some point you've got to give the market what they want. So SalesMatrix is really about dynamic analysis and really getting in and not really about your traditional printing an A4 page style reporting. But we are now basically offering up a dashboard system. I'm not going to cover it today. It's just be aware of it. If you're considering something like Microsoft Power BI or Tableau or Click, Dashboards is a very cost-effective alternative to those solutions. Just reach out if you basically have any questions or want to know more. The key point is all three of our products can effectively integrate with any ERP, accounting, or inventory management system. We have dozens, and there's a lot more than just the logos on the screen, but we have dozens of integrations in place, and pretty much cover off at least the top 20 accounting and inventory management solutions in the market in Australia. We can build out any other integration, so even if you end up changing your accounting system, please keep us in mind that you don't have to lose SalesMatrix on the way through. We can integrate to basically any system, whether desktop or cloud. So let's jump into SalesMatrix. This is what this is all about. SalesMatrix is basically the product that most of you have been using and to varying degrees. It's a Windows desktop-based application. It's incredibly feature-rich, and what it does is it creates what's called an Olap Cube, and it creates that Olap Cube by pulling the data from your ERP system. I'm going to talk about the specifics of that in a moment, but the key point is that this application is running typically on a workstation or in a terminal server environment, and it's being accessed by the key sales managers, the CEOs, the key people of interest who really want to get in and understand data and what's going on from a sales perspective and look for upsell, cross-sell opportunities, as well as trends and other things. If I was to show you every single feature in the product today, we'd be here for the next 8 hours. So I'm going to try and make sure you're aware of the core functionality, as well as, you know, get below just scratching the surface on the things that are the most powerful within the product. The key thing to understand is that the data coming into SalesMatrix is driven by an SQL script. SQL is just a buzz term that stands for structured query language. It just basically means that we ask the database that underpins your accounting, ERP, inventory management system for the key data that we need. And that data is your customers, your products, your sales channels. Most often sales channels are sales reps, but it can be locations or online versus offline sales, etc. And your transactions, typically your invoicing file, though some people do like to use their orders and record the date of the order as opposed to the date of the invoice. And again, that is all tailorable within the system, what your definition of a transaction is. The basic premise is customer A buys a certain number of products from a sales channel, be that a sales rep or a location, at a price with a certain cost. Now we go and construct a data cube based on that. Now the data cube and the power of the data cube is also enhanced or improved by the way that we then use groupings. So we have out of the box a standard of 5 customer groupings and 5 product groupings that you can use. Those of you using Attaché, the sort of fields you might look to use in the customer master file is the sort, the rep, the territory, the category, the price level, the custom fields. There's lots of fields there that can be used. Within the product master file, there's the product group, the supplier 1, 2, and 3. One that I really like to use over the years has been the cash register department. Not many people use cash register in Attaché, but it does offer you on the master file a drop down, so people can't key in an invalid, incorrect grouping, if that makes sense. So a lot of my customers, and there's a few of you on the line from when I was doing Attaché 12, 13 years ago, basically we will have used the cash register department as a second product group. There's also another drop down there called the default cost center. If you're not using cost centers in Attaché, that's a good one to use as a product group. There's also custom fields. So the idea behind these groupings is the more you can start to associate like for like, the better the intelligence underneath the SalesMatrix product. We've got a few users of MYBXO on the call today, so I thought I shouldn't make it all Attaché centric. Those of you using XO, it's the same logic that applies. XO has an SQL database. We can pull basically anything. So the way that you want to use the groupings within XO can inform the SalesMatrix and the SWOT engine as to what like for like actually means. So we're looking at things like, if you've got oil filters do you also have air filters as a distinct product group? There may be a master group called filters, but oil filters might be a separate distinct group from air filters, etc. So the better we can categorize that data and be pulling that through the SQL script, the better it is overall for the data that you're then analyzing within SalesMatrix. As you will see, SalesMatrix has the ability to dynamically create product groups. And that is something that can be very, very handy if you are doing one-off type analysis or you're doing it on the run while you're analyzing things. But ultimately, the core groupings that you use should always go back to the source of the data, which would be your ERP inventory management system. Those of you who are using Attaché, I have to stress this. I haven't seen any of the customers we've spoken to in the last couple of weeks that were aware of this. But when Attaché moved from Attaché Accounts to Attaché BI, they restructured their database and they created what's called SQL views so that the database looked the same as the old Attaché Accounts product. What we've found is those SQL views are very slow and in fact inconsistent. So the data can fail or time out. So most Attaché customers should be changing your SQL script into SalesMatrix to look at the tables, not the views. So if you look at your script and it still says customer_master as the table, for example, that isn't actually a table, that is an SQL view. The table in Attaché is actually now called admin.customer. And if we pull the data from admin.customer as opposed to customer_master, we find that the data is far more reliable and the data is far faster. So all the Attaché users on the line, we really should take the time to review, and we're offering a free review of scripts. For all the other users of different accounting systems on the line, we're happy to extend a review of your script as well, but it's particularly important for the Attaché customers that you have updated your scripts. We note that the default script for Attaché BI that has been delivered by the Access Group does actually look at the SQL views. So if you're still using the default script, or even if you've modified the default script, the SQL views are not the best place to be sourcing the data. But yes, that offer of a free review is there. Feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to drive that for you. Review your script to make sure, and that accounts not just for the Attaché users, but for all the users of all the systems. We can just make sure we're optimizing, getting the right groups and reading the right data. As I mentioned before, SalesMatrix is underpinned by something called an Olap Cube. You can Google it. I'm not going to explain Olap in great detail, but the point behind Olap is that it allows you to slice and dice in multiple dimensions. So rather than a traditional proprietary database or SQL database where I run based on table structures and I have to run queries based on the two-dimensional nature of the database, Olap cubes allow me to construct multi-dimensional data cubes, which then can be sliced and diced into the dimensions that it can be displayed on the screen, which is most often 2 dimensions, but it allows fast and easy switching between those dimensions. The important thing is you can have multiple data sets. Even if you've only got one company and one data where your data is sitting, there's different ways we can slice and dice the data. For example, if you've got a lot of products, you may want to set up a SalesMatrix data set that only pulls out at product group level. That way the data will be super fast in SalesMatrix, and that could be a light way of really getting in and analyzing your sales by customers, by product group, those sorts of things. Where you may have a more detailed one that you're using for more detailed analysis of your products. But the point is you can have multiple data sets running in SalesMatrix, and that's very important to know. Something that I've also been surprised not many customers are aware of, that we can automate the updates. Yes, you can open up SalesMatrix and manually update the system, but it is something that you can automate. I spoke to someone yesterday who told me that they tried to automate it 5-10 years ago. We do use something called Windows Task Scheduler. 5-10 years ago, the Windows servers and Task Scheduler were not very reliable. My experience in recent times is that has changed, and that we can fairly consistently create auto updates of the databases. So normally what would happen is we would have a database update into SalesMatrix happening at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, so that any point in time, you know the data that you're analyzing in SalesMatrix is up to date as of last night. So if you want those, there is a bit of a trick to it. I'm happy to send you the instructions which walk you through being able to do it yourself or with your IT department or external service provider. Otherwise, we're happy to offer a flat fee because it can be tricky. It may take 20 minutes, it may take an hour or two. Just to de-risk it for you, we're happy to give a fixed fee of $99 per data set that we automate. If that's of interest, just reach out on email. Before we jump into the product, just want to talk about the versioning. Version 6 will be released by the end of this month. Everyone should upgrade to version 6. There'll be a number of bug fixes in there, but also a number of new functionality that I'll run through today. Some of that is pretty cool and things that customers have requested over the last couple of years. Key thing is that we've obviously removed the attaché branding from our product, and we're standalone with the branding that we're bringing into the Australian New Zealand market now. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that there are 2 versions of SalesMatrix. There is a full license, which allows you to perform updates, and there is a viewer license, which allows you to analyze the data that's been created by a full license solution. The pricing is $100 for the full license and $50 a month for the viewer licenses. But basically, the viewer licenses are a way, if you did want your sales team or multiple people on staff to get access to the solution, you could run a full license on a server where the data is basically being updated. And then viewer licenses could then be used to pull that data locally and just perform an analysis on that. So it's a way to get the solution out to your team. Now, I wouldn't suggest every one of your sales reps getting a viewer license because not all reps actually have the capability to understand data and really get in and use the tool. That's why we created SWOT, to be honest, is because we find that the average sales rep is overwhelmed by data analysis. But if you do have some of your reps or other staff who are quite tech savvy or understand data, then getting them a viewer license is a great way to get access to the system at a reduced cost. So let's jump into SalesMatrix. I'm going to basically stop sharing my PowerPoint and open up SalesMatrix on a different screen. So just bear with me while I do that. And come back to Zoom. And share screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see I'm running version 6 of SalesMatrix. It's the nice new colors. Basically, the screen that I land on would typically be, if I've got auto update running, it's going to have the data sets up to date as of last night. If I'm manually updating the databases, I'm jumping into new, and I can have multiple scripts here that are written. I could dissect in various ways. For example, there's a few customers who might want to view by sales rep in one view, but they might also have multiple locations or multiple sales channels, such as online, offline sales that they want to analyze instead of by sales rep. So we can create multiple ways that you basically dissect that data. But if I go back to the main screen, the way most of you would be operating is you're selecting the specific data set on the main screen, and we're jumping into the solution. Now, the first screen that I land on is actually an option within the system. And I'm going to show you that before I really talk about anything. So you'll see up here, there's an icon, and these are new icons. So it's going to look slightly different to yours, but I've got an icon here for options. The other way of getting there is to go Tools, Options. The options screen, I find most people haven't even looked at it, but that's fair enough. But the options screen allows you to basically tailor quite a few things about what you're looking at within the data. You can rename your product groups. You could do that. I tend to do that in the script rather than in SalesMatrix, but it is possible to rename them if you're not happy with the naming convention, etc. We can look at the way that we analyze, like the year in SalesMatrix defaults to a year being a calendar year. If you in your organization look at financial years, i.e. Australian financial year, New Zealand financial year being Australia June or New Zealand April, we can view it based on financial years, etc. So there's a number of options there. I can also view the way the grid lays out, and I can change the colors of the grid. I can change the way that my titles lay out. I'm not going to go into every option here because it, for the most part, doesn't really matter. Key things I will highlight is the numeric formats. A lot of people want decimal. A lot of people don't want decimals. You get to choose whether your percentages include decimals or not. You get to choose whether your units include decimals or not. You get to choose whether your values have a dollar sign in front of them or not, etc., etc. There's a new functionality. I think the guys at Complete Health are on the line. We added recently, which is around when you're exporting to a grid, being able to include extra details in the export. So if, for example, here I've got the customer name, I might want to basically export customer name and customer code, or if it was product, I want to export the product code, etc. Then the extra details will go out to Excel. As I said, I'm not going to cover off everything. Here's a new feature that I do want to highlight. Down the bottom right on the descriptions tab is what presents in the grid can now be defined. This has been like this in SWOT. For those of you who use SWOT for a little while now, it's now like this in SalesMatrix. If I want to just show name of product or customer, I can show name. If I want to separate name and also show code, I can basically nominate how I want that to present in one of 4 ways. So I can very quickly switch between that. So if I'm looking here at my customer, my product, say I don't care about the description, I just want to focus on the code. When I accept that option and I change out to a product view, which I'm going to use the new icon up here to do, which those are on the line yesterday, it's a new icon to do this. If I change the products now by period, you're going to see that I'm looking here at just the product code. If I go back to options, go to descriptions, and I change that to I want code and the name of the product and accept. And I'm just going to refresh that view by basically jumping to a products by period view again. Hopefully that refreshes, and there it goes. You'll see now that it's presenting the product code and then the product name. Now, the reason we use the double pipe, that vertical line on a keyboard is called a pipe, is so that when you export to Excel, you can do a very simple text to columns. For those of you who are familiar with that in Excel, but if I might as well show you that. If you wanted to separate those fields out, you can do a text to columns. I actually also mentioned before that you can also now, when you export that data, there's a tick box in the option to include it as a separate column anyway. That will save out to my temp file. I'll open that. But point of it is that's why we do that delimiting, because no one really puts a pipe or a double pipe into their product description. So it allows you to deal with it in Excel if you want to output to Excel. Just a couple more things I wanted to highlight on the Options tab. There is default directory where your data goes and a default directory where your scripts go. In the case of what I talked about before, where we set up auto updating, typically what we would do is we don't want people to use the data set on the server if we've got auto updating running. What we typically get people to do is copy down to locally. The product performs better because of the volume of data and the nature of Olap Cubes if it is running locally. And so if people copy down, we'll put it into a shared network drive on the network, and people then can copy from that. So when we set up the data directory, this is where it gets defined within the system. Some other things I just wanted to show along here. A lot of the, when we get into the market basket, which I'll explain, we can actually set things like the confidence level. It's defaulted here to 25%. 25% means 1 in 4 times, and that'll mean something when we get to market basket if you're not using market basket at the moment. I'm going to jump out of the options. As I said, I can't cover everything today, but I just wanted to make the original point, which was when I first opened SalesMatrix, the screen that I open on is within that options area. So I basically tell it what my default view is here. So I think after all that carry on, I didn't actually tell you what I set that to. So when we basically turn that on, I basically also have this tick box here, which is show summary at startup. So show summary at startup is the opportunity navigator screen I'm about to go through. If I turn that off, it will just go to the default view. If I tick that, it goes to the summary screen before it goes to the default view, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to come back to the opportunity navigator. One thing I need to highlight, and I did yesterday, the icons that show along the top here are actually limited to a distinct set out of the box. Not all icons are actually showing. If I come across to the very left side of the screen, I use my right mouse click. The ones that are in light gray here are not currently showing as icons on my on the top of my screen. So if I see here that create budget is actually missing off my screen, because I may not use budgets, but basically I've now just added that. I have a preference that for most customers, I come in and I turn on all of these things. I think you're better to see the icon and be curious about what it is than to not know that the icon exists. A key point about SalesMatrix too, though, is, and the argument that Kim has and our product team have, is that all the items that are on the icon list are available in the menus at the top. So whether you're navigating via an icon or via the menus, everything is available nonetheless. But I am an icons person, and I do like to turn them on. And I turn them on as a starting point from when I'm first basically setting up a customer. So the thing I'm going to go back to now is that original screen, which is the Opportunity Navigator screen. Now, Opportunity Navigator screen basically was born pre-SWOT existing. What we started to experience around 2009, 2010 was the functionality of SalesMatrix just kept growing, and the sales reps who were using it were getting a little bit of analysis paralysis. They would come in and they basically would just get lost in all the different functionalities of the product. So what Kim and the team decided at the time is, well, how can we simplify it? You know, if we use plain English, this would be a really good way to drive people to the key areas of the product that are going to improve their sales. Those who were on the call yesterday will remember the formula. Growth is a formula based on acquisition of new customers plus retention of existing customers and their revenue, as well as the attachment or upsell / cross-sell of additional revenue into those customers. SalesMatrix is really focusing on those last two elements, being the retention and the cross-sell and upsell. So what this first Opportunity Navigator was all about when we brought this in about a decade ago was to really start to use the plain English as a way to get to the complicated, or to really understand the key points of SalesMatrix to get to that could have direct impact on that retention and cross-sell, upsell. These are here, all they are, as I mentioned, is they're shortcuts to specific screens. So if I want to have a look at here what customers are trending upwards, SalesMatrix it's just a shortcut to what is one of the assessments. We're going to talk about assessments in detail, but effectively it's just created a shortcut to get to the assessment screen so that someone basically doesn't have to really understand that customer trend sits under the assessment icon. I could then go and run that report, and it's going to basically take me the next step to actually creating a grid out of the grouping based on my trend. Hopefully that's making sense. I'll just remind to anyone, if I'm going too fast or if there's something that I haven't clarified, please use the chat window. I know I talk very fast, but I do only have an hour and I've got 31 minutes left of that hour to cover off all the things today. So that's what effectively the plain English element of the Opportunity Navigator is about. It is very much the start of the idea that was to become SWOT, which is simplifying down the complex to make it simple and by using plain English. If I also look here on the Opportunity Navigator, I have a results tab and a best of breed tab. And I know I covered this off yesterday, so I'm not going to do it in great detail today, but I'm a big fan of this from a sort of helicopter macro view of what's going on within the organization. I can see overall a comparison, either a year-to-year comparison or specific month-to-month comparison for the whole business. And I can also look at individual customer groups or individual customers or individual product groups, individual sales reps. All that stuff can be done at this level. So for example, if I wanted to have a look at my sales rep, Andrea. At a macro view, basically using the results page of the Opportunity Navigator, I can see that year-to-year comparison, 2019 versus 2020, Andrea has improved her sales by 58%. That's excellent. The really good thing is that she's also improved her margin. Hasn't been at the same percentage, so she's given up some margin to grow the revenue, but nonetheless, her revenue is up 12%. The actual individual units that she's selling is up, and I'm basically seeing here that the margin percentage, as I already identified, is down from 16% to 11%. But as long as our margin is really increasing and we're not sort of losing the farm on it, that may be something that we decide. I can also see she's selling more products. She sold 285 in 19. She sold 311 products. That's a good thing. She had 78 customers in 19. She now has 106. So this is a nice way to really get in and understand at a high level what's going on, both from a company level, individual customer, products, etc. I'll highlight the KPIs down the bottom. The whole premise behind SalesMatrix, as I mentioned yesterday, came out of the balanced scorecard and what is very deep business thinking. These key performance indicators then are follow through on that, which are what are the key drivers within a sales environment and what does have a direct correlation typically on improving your sales. So the revenue per sales rep has a direct correlation. The number of products that you're selling per customer typically has a direct correlation on revenue and margin. The number of products that each salesperson is selling, these things are there. Just to explain the not self-explanatory, market white space percentage means if I laid out all my customers and all my products on a grid, which I can do in SalesMatrix, what percentage of the squares are going to have 0 in it? Where is someone not buying a product? So theoretically, I want to see that number getting smaller. I want to see that I don't have a whole heap of products that aren't selling to a whole heap of my customers. I want to have the market white space percentage decreasing. In this case, I'm basically seeing it increasing. So that's something that I'd probably look to address with my purchasing manager, my warehouse manager, and start to look at the products that aren't really turning within my customer, my product base. And I can use SalesMatrix to identify that. The other thing is the 80-20 rule. So what number of customers makes up 80% of my revenue? There's a theory of business that said you don't want to be too reliant on too few customers. In 2019, 12 customers made up 80% of our revenue. In 2020, 13 customers made up 80% of our revenue. It's moving in the right direction, but it still is pretty lean depending on your industry. The same applies then to products. I'm jumping down to best of breed. Best of breed is another tab, but it's all about basically a quick view of who your top 20 are. Top 20 for Andrea, these are her top 20 customers. It could be top 20 overall. The thing I like to show here with sitting down next to a sales rep is to show something like this, which is, hey, our number one customer by revenue is Life Supplements. But look at this, they're negative margin customer. The actual number one customer, the people who are making us the most money, is Great Earth. Their revenue is only $30,000, but their margin is $11,000 because we've got a really good margin percentage in at that customer. How do we get more Great Earths within our customer base? And to be honest, less of the Life Supplements, because ultimately that's a customer that's taking up a lot of our resources for no real benefit. Anyway, you can sit here and you can analyze, you can look at individual months, you can look at individual, breakdown of revenue, margin percentage by your overall customer base, etc. It's a really nice way to get in and start to sort of think about the data. And I think that's the key thing with SalesMatrix. It's about asking the questions that get you thinking. And then basically it's not going to answer those questions. You basically need to then use your own knowledge of your customer and product base and tactics to then resolve any issues or take advantage of any opportunities that present. Okay, I'm jumping into the grid, and I'm not going to cover all the details of the grid other than to say these two new icons are a new way. Normally I've taught people to right mouse click here in the middle. There was also in the older versions a little drop down box up the top here where it would bring up this right mouse click menu. This icon makes it easier in a touch environment if people are moving to touchscreen, but it also just makes it pretty logical. I can change the X and Y axis. I can also change the values within the grid. The other thing I highlight next to that is favorites. Favorites came into the product, I think, around version 5. And I haven't found too many customers who are using it regularly. What favorites is about is if I get to a certain view of my data that I want to come back to in the future. For example, it might be, hey, I'm going to look at my Eastern region by quarter. This is a view I'm going to come to on a regular basis for whatever reason. Now, I've done a couple of mouse clicks to get to that view. If I now go and basically add that to my favorites, I can right mouse click and go add to favorites. I can then name that. So I'm going to say, because this is, actually I didn't limit it to Eastern after all of that. Let's go back to there. Categories, region, Eastern. Now I'm just looking at the Eastern region customers by quarter. So I'll do that again, add to favorites, customers Eastern by, I'm going to rename that quarter. Now what that's done is it's added it to my favorites view. And I can get to these favorite view very quickly then in future. So there's no more remembering. One of the things I used to have when I was doing attaché consulting, back a decade ago, when we did a lot of SalesMatrix, people would ask, how do I remember to get back to that? And I'd write up all these notes in Microsoft Word on this is what you click to get to there. Well, what this basically did, Kim and the team have done, I don't have to teach you how to get there again because you can save it as a favorites view. So I've got one here called customer type by period. So this is going to show me the groups by type, and it's going to basically give me a view. And I happen to have the traffic lights turned on. I haven't had to remember to get to that. I'm just going to basically switch off the traffic lights, come back and get to the grid view again. Now, I'm trying not to cover too much of what we covered yesterday. One thing I didn't cover yesterday is the drill down on the individual cell. So I always teach people to sort. The sort can happen both of the rows, but also the columns. So I've got here, I've just sorted in ascending with one click, descending with 2 clicks of the total. I can also click horizontally across the columns by double clicking on the total. So if I double click on grand total, it's now put my largest month followed by the second largest month, followed by the third largest month. So regardless of what view I'm on, I can use that horizontal and vertical sorting to start to group things within my grid. And what this starts to show for me is like, well, here's my 2, 4, 5th biggest customer didn't buy anything off me in my 2 biggest months. What was going on there? Are they a new customer? Like, why didn't they buy us off anything in those months? That's an interesting thing to understand. I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll do it again. Traffic lights is a bell curve. Basically, when you use mathematics and you know that you have an average dispersion of what we expect, we use a thing called standard deviation to identify the color coding or the traffic lighting. Red is beyond one standard deviation to the left of the bell curve, otherwise known as bad. Orange is pretty bad, amber's in the middle, light green is pretty good, and green is really good. What the traffic lights tends to do is it allows you to see things that you may not have otherwise seen if it was just in plain numbers. It will highlight for you key things that you should then focus on. So I can see here that my number 2 customer, Health Generation, had a relatively bad July. I'm going to double click on July and I'm going to have a look at what really happened in July. Well, they bought 63 different products off us, and the salesperson involved was Jamie. Well, I get on the phone to Jamie and just sort of have a chat and say, hey, Jamie, what was going on in July for that particular customer? Now, obviously, 2020 being the year that it was, it could have been a COVID lockdown. We don't really know, but it starts to highlight these anomalies. The first thing I would always do when I see anomalies is look at the previous month. So the previous month being June 2020, well, there you go. So they had an exceptional June, or a pretty good June, which probably indicated a less August, and then less of July, and then August was pretty good thereafter. So drill down happens within the cell. The other thing that happens within a cell is the ability to make notes. I'm just going to turn off the traffic lights to make this point. So I might see an anomaly here, like I see this customer's got no sales in that month. If you come up to the data menu, or if I use right mouse click, you'll see the ability to flag a note. Now the system has some default notes, so you don't have to type. So those default notes are things like customer doesn't use or sell, it's a future opportunity, flag to investigate, etc., etc. So there's a whole heap of standard notes that you can just quickly select. And the benefit of coming up to the data tab is it tells you what the shortcut is on your menu. So I can see here that if I wanted to flag this as investigate, it's a Control F3. So if I come back to this cell, I'm now selected on that cell. You can see that it's highlighted. If I go Control F3, it's going to automatically flag that cell. You can see the cell has now changed color. I can hover over that, and that note is now presenting itself as investigate. Hopefully that makes sense. So those notes are available. They can be customized notes that you data enter. So I can come down here and I can make a note, and I just want to say add note, and that note can be anything. Or through the use of the keyboard shortcuts, there are common notes that our customers are using. The common notes will flag with a color around it. The custom notes will flag with a red in the corner. There's a few customers I've spoken to lately who weren't aware of the notes. It's really, really helpful if there are multiple people who do have a look at SalesMatrix, or you're looking at data over a period of time and you're wanting to remember to come back to something that you're not going to address straight away. Or you're preparing for a sales meeting, you're going to bring in all your sales team and you want to start talking about why on earth aren't we selling these products, and you want to start making notes like that. Hopefully that makes sense. So drill down is available in the individual cell, and I highlighted this yesterday. It's one of the best features I think of SalesMatrix is drill down also exists at row level. So Great Earth is my #1 customer. I'm going to pick someone down here like Health Live Victoria. Come down and I'm going to double click on that particular customer. Basically, the first screen that opens up, and this has been relatively new, I think this came in version 5, it gives me a very detailed view of that customer broken down by period, by revenue, margin percentage, number of transactions, all in one screen. One screen that I can email, that I can copy out to Excel, etc., etc. So it's basically highlighting for me for this customer. February 20 was a bad month, but it looks like they didn't have any sales in January. So they might have been a new customer in February, and then their sales have improved over time. That's interesting for that customer. Let's have a look at the intelligence tab. Let's have a compare of Health Live Victoria to others within the Health Live group. So this is where the grouping becomes really, really, really important. So I can see that these guys are a part of a buying chain called Health Live, and this customer is not buying these products that others within the Health Live buying group are buying. And there's one there that gets bought a lot. 242 times we've sold the New Grow fish oil. These guys have never once purchased it. Now, if that's not a sales opportunity, I literally don't know what is. The same thing applies across your 5 groupings. So this is again coming back to your ERP, and the way you use your ERP to do the groupings becomes really powerful and informs SalesMatrix in how it can help with your upselling and cross-selling. I'm now looking at the Southeastern region. Particularly when you're selling food and these sorts of things, regions do have a big impact on the tastes of people and also the sort of products that people in those regions want to buy. And I can see here that a product is selling a lot in the Southeast region that these guys just aren't buying. Now, there may be some reasons for that. For example, I may have exclusivity over some of my products to certain customers, but at least it's asking the question. So again, I just emphasize that the groupings coming out of your ERP system do help inform this sort of analysis. Former products, very good for helping with retention. Often competitors can take shelf labels off, or customers just forget to buy certain items, or sales reps forget to sell it. I can look at what products haven't been bought in the last 1, 2, 3, 6 or 12 months. Market basket opportunity. As I mentioned yesterday, this is about buying a Big Mac, fries and a Coke. the idea is that McDonald's know 83% of the time that you buy a Big Mac, you're going to buy fries and a Coke with that. So what the market basket opportunity looks for is products that this customer is buying where there is a direct correlation to other products across your entire customer base. Now, today I've got an example here that is actually valid. So the opportunity is the column on the left. So there's an opportunity, again, this came up already in one of the other views, that the New Grow Fish Oil 100C, they are not buying that product. The product that they are buying is the New Grow Glucose 1590T. Now, there is a direct correlation between customers buying the Fish Oil 100C and the 1590T of 28.2%. So that means that 28.2% of the time that someone buys this product in the middle, they will also on the same day buy this product. I mentioned it yesterday. It's a fascinating case study, but in the US, they did analysis on a supermarket. The number one correlating item that sold with nappies in US supermarkets was actually beer. And, you know, sometimes the point of that is sometimes the correlation isn't always obvious. You may know that bacon goes with eggs, but you may not actually understand that similar customers are buying the Nugo blister and the fish oil on the same day. And the margin percentage, as I said, is an option. So it's currently set to 25% confidence, so 1 in 4. If you want to make that less sensitive, you can. If you want to make it more sensitive, you can as well. Top products, last customers, that stuff is relatively straightforward. The same applies on products. And basically, the benefit of viewing it from a product perspective is to help your warehouse manager or your purchasing manager deal with slow-moving items, as well as basically take advantage of your good margin items. So we can start to change the view. So I'm looking here at products by period, by margin. So I've now done a sort, and I can see my top product by margin, as in dollars coming in the door. Last year was rosehip oil. If I right mouse click, I can change that now to margin percentage. Oops, I've selected margin. I actually should come over here and use my new icon. And we'll change that to a ratio, which is margin percentage. And I can start to look at, okay, what are my items at a good margin percentage? Maybe I should look at opportunities within my high margin percentage. And obviously, the quality of the data is only as good as what you've got in your ERP system. So here's something with 100% margin. Perhaps I bought it off my supplier, got given it for free. But there can be, you know, anomalies in that data that you need to address at the source. Again, I can use the notes to address that within SalesMatrix. But let's come down here to say the Herbalife Mixed 12s. 59% margin, that's a good product. I'd love to know who else I can basically sell that product to. So I'd come into the intelligence area and I'm looking at former customers. So who stopped buying this product? Well, the guys in Albury at Health Generation have stopped buying it. Well, we should get back to them. It's such a good margin product. We really want to keep selling it. What are the market basket correlating products? So it says that this product has a direct correlation with the New Glow blister, et cetera, et cetera. So, and this gives me the percentage of what the confidence is. The thing that I would then do is I would be looking at, and you can see when I hover over, it actually tells me those percentages. I'd be looking at, can I do a promotion where I do a package of items where it included this slow moving item and some of these high moving items. If I switch it to the market basket view, it shows me where I can package up, in this case, up to 4 items. These 4 items are selling 54% of the time together, which is incredible. So 54% of the time I sell any one of them, I sell all 4 of them. So there is some opportunities to cross-sell this product where someone might be buying any one of those other 3 to be able to sell this particular product. I think I've done that to death, and basically you'll get in and you'll be able to use that. I wanted to now talk about a few of the things at the top that I haven't discussed either today or yesterday. One is my product quadrant view. The idea behind quadrants is that I have this idea here is that I have a grouping of my products called supplier. So these, I can group my products by who the vendor is or who the supplier is. I can also group my products by the type of products they are, confectionery, cosmetics, etc. Now, sometimes I want to look at the sales for a supplier by the product group. or product type in this case. And that's where Quadrant View comes in. Quadrant View is about groups within groups and using the 2 dimensions of the screen to actually analyze groups within groups. So my supplier is now categorized down the left, and across the top, I'm looking at my groups of customers. So it allows me to do those groupings from the grid on the left. So I've primarily started with a view which is supplier by type. I could actually reverse that. If I wanted to do type by supplier, I just navigate using the categories on the left. So quadrants can be quite powerful when you're really looking to negotiate with the supplier in this example, or understand what the mix of your sales or purchases are across groups within groups. The same concept applies to customers, where I can look at the types of customers within a region. So for example, I've just switched to type by region, and you can see that I've got, I might change this to a revenue rather than a margin percentage. I can see the types of businesses and by region where the revenue is coming from. Again, I'll do my sort. My number one customer type is the Help to Live buying group. And I can see that the Eastern region is significantly stronger than most of the other regions. And in fact, Tasmania is quite weak for us for that. That probably makes sense based on where the population is. But basically, the quadrant view is just a nice way to navigate and look at groups within groups. Hopefully that makes sense to all. The other thing I wanted to highlight, because it came up with one of the attaché customers that I spoke to last week, is that while SalesMatrix defaults to a period being equal to a calendar month, it doesn't have to. The script that brings in the data can bring the data in and group it based on daily, based on weekly, based on a whole array of different ways that you want to group. Month tends to be the most common within the wholesale stock distribution businesses in Australia and New Zealand, but it isn't the only way that people like to analyze. Within the retail industry, they really work on weeks and even days is what they want to focus on. So what we've done with SalesMatrix, you have these couple of icons at the top where you have alternate periods. Now I can do this in the script. So when the data comes in, the data can come in with alternate periods configured so that I'm looking at it. But let me just say, I think I've got some alternate periods set up. Here I've got weeks running. So I'm looking at week 40 in the year 2020 through to week 51 in the year 2020. So I've created alternate. So this is sales by week. Now, in order to configure that, I can do it in SalesMatrix, and I can do it using this configure alternate periods. Now, the opportunity is to do it daily, weekly, fortnightly, semi-monthly, which is another word for twice a month, which is a little bit different to fortnight, obviously, because there's not 2 equal fortnights in a month, except for February. 4 weekly, monthly, quarterly, half yearly, or annually. So if I want to create alternate periods, I have the ability to do that within the SalesMatrix solution. And I can do it as a one-off where I just basically, hey, I'd be really keen to see what our sales are going like daily in the month of January. So I could go, okay, I want to look at daily, and I want to, I might just look at December. So I'll go from, oops, what did I do there? I go back, December, type that in, 2020, easier way to do it, 12 to 31. And I might then categorize by monthly and quarterly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm basically changing my grid view to the days of the month. So I can then get a real granular view of what's going on in the month. Again, I can sort, look at this view, and you'll see here that I've then got the groupings where I can have a look at the months and the quarters above it. Hopefully that makes sense. So I can switch back to my standard view. And again, within the script, if I show you the script actually has accommodation for defaulting what those views are. Unfortunately, yeah, the customer I spoke to, Attache, they thought that the only way they could get views in SalesMatrix was monthly. That's just because it defaults to monthly. That's not because that is the limitation. In fact, I think about 15 years ago, Kim did up a version of SalesMatrix and called it Retail Matrix, which was based on daily and weekly sales. It was the same product. They just basically branded it different for the different industries. The key point to understand with SalesMatrix, our typical focus is B2B, inventory-based businesses, and they typically will do month-to-month style reporting. So that's why it defaults like that. Okay, continuing along. I just got to check my notes and make sure I'm ticking off on all the things that I wanted to jump into. Feel free to add any questions to the chat box if there's any specific things that you want to see before we wrap up. Okay, I wanted to highlight, as I said, the changes in version 6. I did nominate this yesterday. First thing you'll see is the icons are updated. Your icons won't look like these icons. These are the updated icons in the new version. You'll also see these 3 new icons that sit at the level below the other icons for effectively the alternative to right mouse clicking. The next thing is that you can also refresh the data. If you're looking at the data set and you basically want to perform a refresh, you now have the ability to go file, refresh data. You don't have to exit SalesMatrix and create a new data in order to refresh it. There's also been changes to suit Windows 10. There were a few little idiosyncrasies and bugs that had slipped into the product because of changes made by Microsoft to Windows 10. So if you have been using 10 and finding some bugs, we believe by the time that we get this product released in the first week of February, that we will have all those Windows 10 bugs ironed out. Now, there's a few questions that are coming up, and Rachel from HSK Group, can you go through the Excel report? For example, if we have 20 products we want reps to be focusing on selling, which report would provide the best for customer opportunities for reps to target those 20 products? That's a good question, Rachel. So you're saying that you've got a specific group of 20 products. I'd probably look to group those products, and it's actually a good segue. If I don't want to do my grouping back in, I think you guys are using Microsoft Nav, I can actually create a grouping within SalesMatrix. So I can come to the data tab and I can go categories, and you'll see your customers and your product categories are coming through. Now, in one respect, you may not be using some of these categories. You might see it says unused or it says category 4. And I've got here that basically everything is sitting as unallocated in category 4. What I might do is I actually might start to create a grouping of those 20 products. If I go new, I might call it my new products. And I've got a group here of new products, and I can start to now chuck those products by going through the list into a grouping that's specifically called new products. I won't do 20 because we're running out of time, but I've done a few here, okay? So now when I go close and I come to a products view, in my category 4, which I can rename in my options if you remember earlier in the session, I now have a grouping of products called new products. Now, that is then limited to those 20 new products that you wanted to look at. Now, what Rachel's talking about is I know the HSK group use something I wasn't actually going to cover in great detail today, but there is a function under tools called opportunity reports. Opportunity reports is kind of like the precursor to ultimately what SWOT is producing. But where it comes in handy is someone like Rachel who sits above all the sales rep, wants to know what to really push the sales reps on. So you can come into the opportunity report and I can say, okay, I want to focus on customer opportunities or product opportunities. Sorry, in the example Rachel wanted to see, product opportunities. And I can do it just to that specific group, Rachel. So you see here, I've created that group. Now I just want to focus on the product opportunities within those 20 products. And I go select. Now, this is a very, very, very complex report. Hopefully, because I've only got 4 products, it doesn't take too long to run. But as Rachel, you would know, it can take an hour to run because of the level of analysis. This is really our artificial intelligence engine that's running. That's now run, and that's now produced on my other screen, Rachel. I'll drag it across. Those opportunities for just those 20. Hopefully that makes sense and that answers your question, Rachel. If it doesn't, we'll have a chat offline.
Thanks, Matt.
That was it?
Yes.
Awesome. So that's what I think we should do in that case. And to be honest, Kerry's the next one with a question, and I think I've already answered her question in part. Kerry's asking, how can I just group specific customers? If you don't want to do the grouping in your exosystem, Kerry, so if it's just a one-off, you want to have a look at some specific customers, then it's the exact same thing that I just did. I can come to data categories and I can select customers. I find a category that I want to overwrite or I'm not using, and I would then come in and I would create a new category. So in my case here, I'm using all of my categories, but what I could do is I could just basically kill them off and move everything out of the categories. And then I could create a new category called Kerry's Group. And then I can start moving specific customers into Kerry's Group. And it's under the demographics tab. And I'm going to go close. I'm going to jump into my options just to show you still getting used to the icons. So the customer category 4, I overwrote with category 3 was demographics. I'm going to call that special, just so you know I can rename the group. So now when I go, Kerry, to a customer view, which I'll use my little icon here and change it to customers by period. You're going to see my little special group here. And when I basically break into Kerry's group, I've got that limited group that Kerry wanted to see. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll just reinforce. First thing I did is I go into the data categories and I created myself a new group. That would then allow you to focus in on a customized group that's not necessarily related to how you're grouping them in your ERP system. I'm just conscious of the time. I think we've covered a lot today, and my hope is that we are going to get all this sort of information into our online help. We are working on it. It will probably take us a couple of months, but happy to provide some cheat sheets. We do have a lot of this stuff in Microsoft Word at the moment, so we can send it through in PDF form if you want some cheat sheets on a lot of the topics that we covered today. I'm just going to basically finalize by jumping back to my other screen and just wrapping up. Oh. Too many screens. Okay, just one thing I raised yesterday for those advanced users, you don't have to just use SalesMatrix to look at sales. One of the best uses of SalesMatrix I've seen is actually analysing purchasing, because what it does is it allows you to go back to your suppliers and say, hey, have a look at these trends. We're buying 10 times more off you than we were 3 years ago. And using real data to show your supplier that you potentially should be getting a better margin or a better price on the items that you're selling. So the key thing there is that the way that the scripts are coming in can be customized. Those of you, if you haven't booked on tomorrow's session, if you do want to know more about SWOT, there is a session Wednesday and Thursday. If you can make Thursday, fantastic. If you can't make Thursday and you want to make tomorrow, then yeah, by all means do. We will offer a free trial to anyone who's currently a SalesMatrix user that lasts 30 days. Typically, we would have a 14-day trial, but we'll extend that out to a full month for anyone who's already using SalesMatrix. And we'll also basically waive the implementation cost. Dashboards, if you do want some more traditional style reporting and you've been looking at things like Microsoft Power BI or Tableau or Click, then why not have a chat? You might find that we've got a much more cost-effective solution. Reminder, more than happy to do a review of your scripts, particularly the attaché customers, but that extends to everybody. We can have a look at the way that you're using the groupings and the data coming in, even if you wanted to then potentially set up a new script for suppliers, like I mentioned there a moment ago. Reminder, there's the sessions. I will post a recording of today's session and yesterday's session and tomorrow's session. They'll go up on our YouTube channel as probably a private link. If you do want to be able to share that with any of your staff, etc., please just send me an email and I can send you through the link. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I will have a chance to chat to you over the next couple of weeks, and yes, hopefully I'll see some of you on the calls over the next couple of days.